both surprised by the way we looked. The years had changed us too.
Welcome to Gung Home. My name is Matt Hindra. I'm filling in for Joe Giannini. And we're here with Terry Sullivan. And Terry's been telling us some amazing stories that he's written. And I'm not sure what the inspiration for this next one is, but it's a little long, he warned us. And just in case we don't have time to finish it, we'll finish it in the next episode. So, Terry, take us away.
All right. The song I'm going to start with is a typical song about a recruiting sergeant and how he sells the army as, 3 square meals a day and you'll have new clothes and, blah, blah, blah. So, "Oh, Mrs. McGraw," the sergeant said, "would you like to make a soldier out of your son Ted? With a scarlet coat and a big cocked hat. Oh, Mrs. McGraw, wouldn't you like that? Would you do, Raya? Do, Raya? Do, would you do, Raya?" That's one of Pete Seeger's favorite anti-war songs. And you'll see how it turns out after this tale of a stubborn Mick and a mustache. It's called Mustache Madness, Medical Training, Fort Sam Houston, San Antonio, Texas. I had been in this boyo's army about 3 months after I came back from my Christmas leave. I was waiting in platoon formation with my brand new mustache, when I heard, "Sullivan, fall out!" Oh, shite. What do they want? Meanwhile, it's 30 degrees and 5 o'clock in the morning, and only my platoon is going to be kept from breakfast. This is a recipe for a blanket party. You see, one guy screws up, they punish his unit, keeping them out in the cold, da-da-da-da. His unit takes that out on him. So the Army lets your peers do what is illegal for them to do: hit an enlisted man. Great fascist tradition for enforcing norms and weeding out misfits like me. So this is usually done in the cowardly style that the KKK would love. Under cover of darkness and covered by a blanket. They sneak up on their sleeping intended victim, throw a blanket over him, and pummel away. Now, the possibility of naming your assailants is nil. So what can the authorities do? We shall revisit that sadistic soldier turning on soldier after we watch my alleged superiors trot out their dog and pony show about a mustache. Sergeant Coulter, my platoon sergeant, doesn't know what to make of me. We're both Irish-American, Brooklyn, working class, but a lot more than a generation separates us. He's thinking, this kid's got 2 weeks leave, he goes home to New York for Christmas, and he comes back with this silly mustache on his face. Now, looking back on this, there was a lot of time and energy spent on just this piece of facial hair. Everybody was making a real big deal about it. It was a 60s issue. As a sidebar, my older brother Richie, who had a mustache when he was in the Army, he was an artillery officer. And he advised me, they can't tell you to shave the mustache, but they have regulations about trimming it. So they instructed you to shave your upper lip clean for your original ID card in boot camp. So that is the face you must look like. That's their catch-22. They get you to shave and then they say, that's it. Well, I have a catch-22 of my own. I realized when they're taking the photos for our ID cards, they were Polaroids. That means I had the original and the only copy. Now, what if the original is on my dresser at home in New York, right where I want it? They supply the rules and catch-22s, not me. back to Sergeant Coulter. The sergeant brings me up to the barracks, up the stairs, to my locker, and he orders me to open it up. And I say to myself, holy shit, somebody's ratted on me about the grass in my locker. As I open up the lock, the sergeant pointed to the top shelf and said, get your toilet bag. I knew there was no grass in that bag. So I said, why, Sergeant? One word you're never supposed to say to a sergeant is why. It's like the first time they've ever heard it in their lives. They just go nuts. Anyhow, I smiled a deep smile of relief, knowing the sergeant was not looking for my weed. I must have had an odd look on my face, staring back at him, because he said, don't you eyeball me, boy. Get your kit bag and get your ass into the latrine and shave that thing. The sergeant was so close to the grass, and he wasn't looking for it. I had a shit-eating grin on my face that I couldn't stifle. And wipe that silly smile off your face, Sullivan, or I'll wipe it off for you. I gave you an order. Get that bag out. I kept smiling. I said, sorry, Sarge. I'm keeping this. The colonel's going to have your ass on a platter, young man. Sergeant, just between you and me, my old man was a New York City cop, so I've been beaten up by professionals. Yeah, this is like old home week to me. Besides, you guys can't lay a hand on me, right? Because of the regulations, you'll lose your stripes. Wise up, punk. You're just making it hard on yourself. You don't think the Army has 100 different ways to make your life miserable? Don't push your luck, Sullivan. Yes, Sergeant. Seems like folks were always telling me not to push my luck. I'd be pushing it all day long if that's what it really took, but I had no idea what chicken shit lay ahead. Down to the orderly room. So downstairs I went, down along the path of white painted rocks. Now, if it stands still long enough in the Army, it gets painted. I was ordered to see the first sergeant. So I was standing in the orderly room waiting, orderly, like you're supposed to, when all the NCOs come filing into the office. All the privates have been left with their instructors trying to make medics out of them. Corporal Gomez was the last to walk in, being the most junior of the NCOs. He was a short guy, muscular man in his mid-20s with a bantam rooster walk and a sparse adolescent mustache that he was very proud of. A friend of mine used to call this kind of mustache a baseball mustache because, like baseball, there was only 9 on his side, 9 hairs on each side of his nose. So Gomez thought he would flex his harassment muscles in front of the big guys. Where'd you get that caterpillar on your lip, Private? You better cut that off before the colonel cuts something else off for you. Before anyone gets to chuckle, I commented on Gomez's meager mustache. Well, Corporal, when you grow up, you can grow a mustache like this too. The orderly room busy noise dropped dead. Sergeant Coulter spit his coffee about halfway across the room. Everyone was stunned that a private smartass first class would sass any NCO. It was unthinkable. It was that gasp silence I had heard before when I dared hit that sadistic 10th grade English teacher back in Archbishop Malloy, who had already hit me about 6 times in the face, bloodying my nose. The whole class gasped like one enormous mouth. Leave us not digress. All Gomez could muster was a rank power play. The phrasing didn't quite come out how he planned, but he was pissed. Some nobody private was dissing his stash. Oh, Private, after the colonel gets through chewing you out, I'm going to chew you a new asshole. To get your asshole back here at 1700 hours. And we'll go down to the river and we'll make a real man out of you. I wasn't sure who this guy was. I did let my lips shoot off before my brain kicked in, but what could he do? Make me fold back the sheets on the riverbed? Don't say that out loud. You're in enough trouble. and you haven't even seen the first sergeant yet. That's it. No doubt who they're talking to. Here I was the only private in that room. First sergeant's office, on a double. I was about 12 feet away, so double or single time wouldn't have mattered to anyone without a stopwatch. I crossed the threshold to the office door. There's a really musty smell in the wood. That's familiar. I'm thinking, that's my grandpa's cigars, that cheap cigar smoke. Garcia Vega. When I'm snapped back to reality by, Private, where's your ID card? Gee, Sergeant, I don't know. Wipe that shit-eating grin off your face, young man. And while you're at it, wipe that silly mustache off your face. Sorry, Sergeant, no can do. What? Are you disobeying a direct order from a non-commissioned officer of this United States Army? I guess so, Sergeant. You're going to go to jail for a silly mustache? I think so, Sergeant. Well, I'll tell you what, Private, you want to fry your own ass? I don't care. Don't do it on my time. Get over to the captain's office and waste his time. Get out of my sight. Oh, now that's interesting, if not confusing. If I was really in trouble, why wasn't I in the stockade? And that sergeant sounded pretty serious. I didn't even consider this might be an idle threat, but why not? Are they playing with me? What the hell is going on? I'm thinking out loud to myself as I cross the compound to the captain's office, down another pathway of tacky white painted stones. They were all about bowling ball size, containing the would-be unruly patches of grass, like horticultural crowd control. The captain's office is a separate, one-story, two-room cottage. And as I knock and enter, the front door barely misses the second lieutenant's desk. A thin brass sign on his desk says, Peyton Gray, second lieutenant. He's got one of those WASP names where you can swap the first and the last name. And he's from Connecticut with one of those real preppy voices. You can't tell if he's rich or he just went to school with them. Probably rich because he's probably not rich. He's in the Army. Yes, Private. The first sergeant told me to come over and see the captain. You don't have an appointment, and the captain is very busy. I don't know, the first sergeant. Hold on just a moment, young man. There's that young man shit again. This guy's no more than 6 months older than me, if that, in this top-heavy power pyramid. A guy like this grabs any opportunity for posing like he has real power over those below him. The lieutenant picks up the big, clunky Army-issue phone that makes him look like he's working out with a barbell. This is back when all the phones were rotary kids. It was hard work dialing telephones. Sergeant, what am I supposed to do with this private you sent over to see the captain? He's not in the area. Sergeant, Sergeant? The sergeant is obviously hung up. Cretin. Well, Private, just have a seat. The first sergeant says to just wait until the captain returns to the company area. Can I have breakfast? It's like 9:30 and I haven't had anything to eat since last night. Don't you guys have regulations about this stuff? I knew very well they had regulations about this stuff. You should have asked about that before. Well, never mind. Go to the mess hall immediately and whatever you get, bring it back here with a hot tea with lemon for me. Mach schnell. Yes, sir, Lieutenant. I walked as casually as possible down to the mess. I now had an okay from an officer to be sauntering into the mess where only NCOs would be, as all their platoons would be in class at this time. I walked in, past the table where all the sergeants and corporals are seated, tipped a hat respectfully, and head for the chow line, where the breakfast is still steaming. So far, so good. Take all you want, but eat what you take, was the Army slogan above the stainless tray slide. It reminded me of home, at least the eat all you take part. I lopped a pile of scrambled eggs and a plop of potatoes on my plate, slid the plastics tray with that special ugly plastic cup, got my coffee, sat down to chow down. I had a fork full of strangled eggs in my gob when the mess sergeant yelled from back of the mess hall, "Private, who told you to come in here and eat in my dining hall?" You see any other privates in here? Answer me, fool. I started shoveling eggs and potatoes, answering kind of a muffled mumble to buy a little more time because it was a long dining hall, and the corpulent sergeant didn't look like he was up for a run or even a quick walk. Lieutenant, you better get your E1 ass out of my dining room, boy. The lieutenant said I should, Sergeant, I said, clearing my mouth momentarily. This gave me time for another assault on the stuff left on my plate, and there. I had it polished off by the time the sergeant got within striking range. I still had a half cup of coffee left, and as I stood up, the sergeant was really close, 5 or 6 feet away, and he carried a 5-gallon pot and a serving spoon the entire distance, and he was now using the spoon for emphasis. The lieutenant asked me to get him a tea, too, Sarge. Don't you understand English? You ain't supposed to be here. Sarge, I'm going, but just doing what the lieutenant said, because I didn't get any breakfast this morning. Oh, yeah? Well, you got it now? Tell that second lieutenant to get his own fucking tea. Fucking lieutenants. I heard the sergeants laughing, but he didn't care. They were the audience this mess hall sergeant was playing to. This was their little clubhouse, and he was the sergeant at arms with a serving spoon and a steel pot. I walked back into the tiny cottage with my half cup of coffee, and of course the first thing the lieutenant says is, Private Sullivan, where is my hot tea with lemon? Well, the mess sergeant really objected to my presence there, sir, and you might say he rejected your request for the hot tea with some salty talk. At the same time, he threw me out of the mess hall. Moron, he can't even cook eggs properly. The lieutenant ignored me and picked up his clunky black Army issue phone again. Sergeant, this is Lieutenant Gray. I'm in charge of the refreshments for the Select Citizens Officers Picnic at Lake Wassa, which is an off-base and unofficial function. And I understand your very unofficial part-time catering business is interested in providing a catering service for our very private soiree. I suggest you show me a sample of how well your catering service works by sending a tea service of your finest Army-issue tea with a plate of lemon slices and a sugar bowl. I believe we understand each other. Thank you, Sergeant. The lieutenant hung up. Blatherskite. Up to that point, I wasn't too keen on this guy, but without raising his voice, he let the sergeant know that rank was irrelevant. He had him by the pocketbook. It reminded me of the very traditional cross-stitched framed sampler Chuck Colson had on his White House office wall. When you have them by the balls, their hearts and minds are sure to follow. What a noble sentiment. I was still waiting an hour and a half later when the captain waltzed in the door, flew through the room, slammed his office door. Captain, the lieutenant tentatively knocked on the panel wood door. The first sergeant sent this private over to see you a few hours ago. The door swung open suddenly. The lieutenant jerked back, flinching his arms together. He's right here. I saw him, Lieutenant. I practically kicked him on the way in. What's your problem, son? This must be some petty trick they teach these insecure young officers. He's about 5 years older than me, and he's calling me son. Well, sir, people are making a lot of fuss over this mustache. It feels all right to me. Where's your ID card? Don't know, sir. Oh, I see. You lost your ID card. Very convenient. Shave that thing, get a new ID card made at the Provost Marshal. Sorry, sir, I'd like to keep the mustache. You see that? Did you hear me, Private? I gave you an order. Well, was that a lawful order, sir? Because I believe? I don't give a rat's ass what you believe. Go see the Sergeant Major at headquarters. We'll see what you believe. He'll make a believer out of you. Out! I worked out the door on the way to headquarters, down the long row of painted white rocks, up another row, out onto the gravel road to headquarters. You could see the flags from a half a mile away. This is where the training center was run from. All 2,700 trainees, and I was the only one asking to have a mustache on my face. I walked up the path of painted rocks between the rows of snapping flags into the orderly room. Behind an enormous desk stood a very decorated African-American sergeant major at a file cabinet. His dress green's uniform had an even darker insignia, signifying he had been to Vietnam. He had 3 chevrons on top, 3 rockers on the bottom, and a star in the middle, meaning he was the highest rank of any NCO in the Army. And he looked serious. "Yes, Private, what do you want?" The phone rang next to his hand. "Yes." "Sergeant Major Towns." "Yes." "I think so." "Thank you, sir. Goodbye." "Private Sullivan, sit down. It sounds like you've been causing some trouble in your company area, insubordination, disobeying direct orders." "Well, don't you interrupt me, boy. Did I say you could speak, young man? I am a sergeant major. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir. Don't you sir me either. I am a sergeant, period. Any thought of keeping that mustache on your face will cease when you cross the threshold of the colonel's door. Because, Private, if you disobey a direct order from a field-grade officer in time of war, you may get up to 5 years in Leavenworth. Is that clear, young man?" "I haven't seen the papers today, Sergeant, but I don't think we declared war last night, did we?" "Come to think of it, Private, the criteria might be during a police action as well. Frankly, I don't care. It's your ass that's on the line, son. Feeling lucky? Well, it's time for you to find out. Just walk over to that door and knock. The colonel's ready and waiting for you. He's got the barbecue warmed up for your butt." I tentatively knocked on the full-bird colonel's door and somebody barked from within, "Open! It's open!" I walked to the front of the colonel's desk, turned right crisply, and saluted. The colonel is dressed in battle fatigues. This does not look good. Battle fatigues are usually worn by infantry officers stateside, not medical officers. And fatigues usually imply the wearer is a hard ass. His fatigues are so starched, you could use his shirt sleeve to cut cold butter. "Lost your ID card, Sullivan?" "I think so, sir." "I think so on purpose would be closer to the truth, wouldn't it, Private?" Don't shit me, son. I got no time for stories here. What's your game?" "My game, sir? I just want to wear my mustache as a matter of personal pride, and the Army tricked me into shaving it off before my ID card picture was taken." "How was that they tricked you?" "They said anyone who wanted to could grow back their mustache in AIT. Medical training was AIT. Well, I can't see you've broken any rules, but you must read the regulations on trimming. When you've trimmed it, report to Sergeant Major Towns for an approval. Put your new face on an ID card at the Provo. Now, I do not want to see that face in this office again. Are we clear?" "Yes, sir." "Dismissed." Oh, I forgot one detail. The colonel wore one of those Ronald Colman mustaches that military men of his era sported. All of its hairs were 1/4 of an inch long. The whole mustache was 3/8 of an inch tall, and its arc was a study in symmetry. I couldn't believe my ears, though. They just fucked with my head for an entire day, as it was 5 o'clock when I walked out of the colonel's office. I had guessed right. I had the right to wear this mustache, and they're the ones who said I could grow it back in AIT. They just wasted my time and tested how much I wanted it. But I lucked out, because I was just that stubborn. Like my mom used to say, there's no sense being Irish if you're not going to be stubborn. Stubborn was not a problem. I had the stubborn gene way down in my DNA. I didn't give a rat's ass about getting into trouble because that would get me closer to getting thrown out for being too much trouble. But this is going to take a while because of that hurry up and wait thing they use. I did succeed in sticking out from the crowd, which really pisses off military folks who want everybody to look the same. And their fixation on controlling facial hair should be studied by a panel of bearded psychiatrists. Now, if you remember, it was Mrs. McGraw that the sergeant was talking to. And the son comes back from war, and he's lost both of his legs. So Mrs. McGraw says to her son, "Oh, were you drunk or were you blind when you left your two fine legs behind? Oh, was it while sailing on the sea that a cannonball took your legs away? With your two fine legs, oh, dearest Mom, don't carry on so, 'cause I got 50 pounds for every toe. And if I had another 10 toes, I'd be off to the war and trade in lows with your two fine legs. With your two,
Thank you for being on Gung Ho with us today.
Not at all.
And
My pleasure.
Joe Giannini will be returning as the host shortly. And I'm happy to have filled in and talked with you today, Terry. It was very
pleasure.
interesting. So thank you for watching.
Now used to be a walk